Hello everyone, welcome to Learn with Wasim. This is Muhammad Wasim Khan, an instructor of your project planning and management course. I hope you all are doing well. As you know that in the previous two parts of this particular lesson, project scope management, we have discussed the plan scope management, collect requirements, define the scope, and create the work breakdown structure. In today's lecture, or the third and last part of this lecture, we will discuss validate the scope and controlling the scope. So let's talk about first the validating the scope. What is validate scope? Validating scope is the process of formalizing acceptance of the project completed project deliverables. So in validating scope, we are actually formally accepting the products or the services or the results that are produced as a result of the previous processes or the project. So the verified deliverables obtained from the control quality process are reviewed with the customer or sponsor to ensure that they are completed satisfactorily and have received formal acceptance. So the deliverables that are accepted or verified, they are, from the control process, they are reviewed by different stakeholders, by the customers, especially, so that to ensure that, they are completed satisfactorily and have received the formal acceptance. Like other process, we have some inputs, tools and techniques, and outputs for this particular process. So let's talk about the input first. As you know that in the previous processes, we have discussed the project management plan. And project management plan was actually discussed in the project integration management chapter. The second one is requirements documentations. And the third one was a requirements traceability matrix that we have discussed in this particular lesson. Let's talk about the verified deliverables. Verified deliverables are a project deliverables that are completed and checked for correctness through the quality control quality process. So those verified deliverables are actually those deliverables that are produced as a result of the project or as a result of different processes in a project. Okay, and they are actually corrected through the quality control process as well. And the fifth one is the work performance data. So work performance data have already been discussed in the previous lecture, but let's discuss it briefly again. So work performance data can include the degree of compliance with requirements, number of non-conformities, severity of non-conformities, or the number of validation cycles that are performed in a period of time. So these are something that are actually included in the work performance data. The compliance with the requirements, whether our product or service is, fulfill the requirements or not. Okay, the number of non-conformities that are present in any particular product or service, or what are the severity of those non-conformities, or the number of the validation cycles that are actually performed in a period of time. So data regarding all of these things are actually, recorded, and that is called the work performance data. Now, if we talk about the tools and techniques, then I hope you know what actually an inspection is, because we have already heard this word for hundred of times. So, what is inspection? Inspection include those activities that are actually used to determine whether the work and deliverables meet the requirements and product acceptance criteria. And these activities include measuring, examining, and validating. So in inspection, we actually measure, we examine, and we validate whether the work and the deliverables that are produced meet the requirements, and that meets the acceptance criteria as well. So inspections are sometimes called reviews, product reviews, audits, or walkthroughs. So we can call inspection as a review, or a product review, or audit, or walkthrough. And the second one is the group decision making techniques, and we have discussed this topic for a number of times. But for you, we have discussed the basics of the decision making techniques, and these are actually that these techniques are used to reach a conclusion when the validation is performed by the project team and other stakeholders. Now let's talk about the outputs that are very interesting. Outputs from the validating scope process. The first one is accepted deliverables. So obviously you all know that deliverables are those products or services or the results that are produced as a result of the project, or as a result of different process of the project, and that meet the acceptance criteria that are formally assigned of and approved by the customer or sponsor or any other necessary stakeholder. Change request, again, we have discussed the change request as well. That change request, are used if you want to repair the defect, if you want to correct any mistake or any problem during the process or during the deliverables, then you will have to request the change in order to improve it, in order to correct it. And we have discussed the process of how you can do changes throughout the whole process. So I hope you all remember that. Work performance information, as we have discussed this again, we are going to discuss this topic, or this, particular, I would say, yeah, topic. Work performance information includes those information about the project progress, such as which deliverables have started, their progress, which deliverables have finished, or which have been accepted. So in work performance information, we will have to collect information about the project progress, that when the project have been started and what are their progress, and which deliverables have been finished or which have been accepted. Then the next one is project documents updates. Project documents that may be updated include documents that define the product or product or report status on the product completion. So we have already discussed it. I think we should not go for that. And the last one is the last process in the project scope management is a control scope. Control scope is the process of monitoring the status of the project and product scope and manage changes to the scope baseline. So in control scope, it is actually a process of controlling the project. How? By monitoring the status of the project, by monitoring the status of the project scope or the product scope, and managing all the changes to the scope baseline. So controlling the product scope ensures all requested changes and recommended corrective or preventive actions are processed through the perform integrated change control process. So actually we will have to ensure that all the requested changes have been made and the mistakes have been or the problems have been corrected in a particular project. that is actually controlling. The uncontrolled expansion to product or project scope without adjustments to time, cost, and resources is called scope creep. So please remember this term, that is the scope creep, and it is very simple for you to understand the definition of the scope creep. That it is actually the uncontrolled, when you are going to uncontrol, when you are going to expand it uncontrolled to a product or project scope without adjusting time, cost, and resources. So there are again inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs in this particular process, and many of them have been discussed already. So we will discuss only those that we didn't discuss yet. So let's talk about the inputs. So you know that what actually a project management plan is. Okay, it includes the scope baseline, the information regarding the scope baseline, the scope management plan, the change management plan, configuration management plan, and requirements management plan. Then we have discussed the requirements documentation, requirements traceability matrix, work performance data, and obviously organizational process assets. So we have discussed almost all of those inputs in the previous lectures. Let's talk about the tools and techniques, and we use the variance analysis. By the way, what is variance analysis? Variance analysis is a technique for determining the cause and degree of difference between the base and actual performance. So if you remember that, the lecture in which I have discussed what actually the baseline is, and I asked, questions from different students about the baseline, and then I draw a graph in which I have shown what actually the baseline is. Okay, so baseline is actually the target value. Okay, and actual performance is obviously the performance, the current performance of the project. So variance analysis, we actually use it to determine the cause and the degree of difference between the baseline and the actual baseline performance and actual performance. So project performance measurements are used to assess the magnitude of variation from the original scope baseline. Yeah, we are using the different project scope performance measurement in order to assess, evaluate the magnitude of the difference, you know, of actual performance from the original scope baseline. So important aspects of the project scope control include determining the cause and degree of variance relative to the scope baseline and deciding whether corrective or preventive action is required. So that was the variance analysis. Now let's talk about the outputs. So again and again, we have discussed the work performance information. What actually the work performance information is. I'll just go through, this particular slide for you. So work performance information produced includes information on how the project scope is performing compared to the scope baseline. It can include the categories of changes received, the identified scope variances and their causes, and how they impact schedule or cost and the forecast of the future scope performance. And then we have the change requests. Analysis of the scope performance can result in a change request to the scope baseline or other components of the project management plan. And again, obviously, if you want to do some changes, then you will have to update the project management plan as well. And for that, we will go towards the scope baseline. We will update that, and we will update the other baseline as well. Another one is the project document update. So obviously, if you have made some changes, then you will have to update all of the necessary or the relevant project documents. And similar is the case for organizational process assets. You will have to update that as well. So what we have done in this particular lesson, let's revise it. It would actually we have discussed in this lesson. In this part of the lesson, we have discussed what actually the project scope is. We have discussed and defined the project scope process, their inputs, their tools, techniques, and outputs. We have discussed the work breakdown structure. And by the way, I gave you an example, an assignment of the work breakdown structure as well. We have discussed what is a developing work breakdown structure process and its inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs. Then we have discussed how to validate the scope process, your inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs. And at the end, we have discussed what actually a control scope process is. What are its inputs, tools, and techniques, and outputs. So that's the end of the lesson. I hope you all will understand this particular lesson. Now, if you have any question, you can ask me or you can email me on mwkhan3259 at outlook.com, or you can call me on the cell number presented in front of you. No, least but not last but not the least, please join and like the Facebook page, Learn with Wasim, and also the YouTube channel, Learn with Wasim. So subscribe the YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you can get and you will be notified, once I upload the videos regarding different subjects like project management, like total quality management, customer relationship management, or human resource management. Okay, and some other courses like consumer behavior as well. So that's the end of the lesson. Thank you and bye bye.